Adaptation is an Herculean task. As you've certainly heard before, the mark of a true artist is the ability to fully utilize the unique properties of the medium they work in. Books are at their best when they fully immerse you through their unparalleled control of verbal narration. A painting shines when the techniques take full advantage of the texture and the physicality of the canvas, and video games become truly special when they commit to the interactive experience completely. But this also means, logically, that adaptation, which is a transference of a work from one medium to the other, is by definition incredibly hard. How can you make a story which was made for one medium shine in a completely different medium? This question requires loads of creativity and ingenuity to answer, and even then, it isn't always successful. However, for us couch watchers and online typers, any adaptation presents a window into the mechanisms of artistic mediums, to see how and why certain tricks only work in a certain medium. And because I'm obsessed, today we'll be talking about the anime adaptation of the My Hero Academia manga by Kohei Horikoshi. The manga to anime adaptation pipeline is among the more streamlined in today's artistic industry, but you still get varying degrees of success. Between stinkers like Berserk 2016 to creamers like Jujutsu Kaisen, anything can happen. And My Hero Academia's anime, produced by Studio Bones, has generally been well received, albeit occasionally criticized within the latest few seasons. I've also been somewhat vocal about some of the things I'm not hot on, but I have never really compiled all my thoughts anywhere. So, today, I would like to do a general overview of the My Hero Academia anime, not as a narrative media product per se, but as an adaptation of the manga material. Before we can get started though, a few ground rules. 1. Adaptation does not equal recreation. I'm gonna say this loads more today, probably, but when judging an adaptation of any work, the level of faithfulness to the original is not an adequate measure of success. Changes will have to be made in order to account for the different mediums, and that is unavoidable, and whining about that because something is different does not really equal criticism. We're here to actually understand why things are the way they are. 2. While I will probably criticize visual aspects, this is done with the understanding that every single person working on this anime is incredibly talented and invested and is doing the best to their abilities. These people are underpaid as hell and really only run on their passion and enthusiasm. I genuinely believe that there are 0 lazy animators and production staff in the entire world, and blaming production issues on them is unfair and ignorant. I would ask you to consider this as well when commenting. Lastly, I am not a Sakuga head, my name is not AJ. I know the names and the styles of a few big animation players, but that's about it. I'm just a guy with moderate behind-the-scenes knowledge. Thus, I can't be going too deep into the back end of animation production. If you do want to get into that, resources like My Sakuga Academia are readily available, and I will link a few accounts in the description that are more knowledgeable than me. It only makes sense that we start with what is first immediately apparent, the anime's general visual quality. My Hero Academia's look is, in one word, good. No matter how often weirdos stuck in the early 2000s zoom into a screenshot of a background character and call it bad animation, the fact remains that the average artistic quality of the anime is absolutely serviceable. All characters are recognizable 100% of the time, shots and action are well structured and rarely get confusing, and while the average level of animation isn't incredibly high, the highlight moments of the story regularly get the premium treatment, so it all works out fine by the end. That is not to say that there aren't a few hiccups. The biggest gripe for me in the artistic department is that the actual base art style of the series can look a little awkward at times. While it never will, and honestly shouldn't, replicate Kohei Horikoshi's drawing style, it should at least produce an equally pleasing product, and I don't think that is always successful. Namely, most faces as well as some body proportions are different in a way that I personally don't prefer, with the anime often elongating the faces. Additionally, as more and more key animators have their distinct styles show through, the anime receives a greater variety of miniature styles within the main style. And while that is a good thing by itself, the result is that Deku especially often looks kind of odd. But that is very much personal preference. However, I think the biggest victims of these inconsistencies are characters with simpler designs such as Mirio, because they become subject to the law of artistic minimalism. The fewer elements a drawing has, the more on point those elements have to be in order for it to look right, since our brains have fewer reference points. So, when Mirio goes through various subtle differences, it's easy for it to look off, which is a shame. Additionally, any design or moment that includes texture in the manga gets severely flattened in the anime, a necessary price to pay, as animating this many lines on a consistent basis just isn't feasible long term, especially not in a TV production. However, it is nonetheless disappointing that the anime then rarely works around it to retain the mood or physicality of the design, instead just going with the flattened version and hoping that we're all fine. This is especially apparent with Hero Killer Stain and Shigaraki. However, lately they've been trying to compensate for it through the use of the same progressive CGI filters that they previously used only on Dark Shadow, and I think the results are fairly nice, like for example on Black Whip. Also, while the art generally looks good, there are the occasional still shots that look pretty wonky, not in the background either, but around the visual focal point, which is pretty odd. When you have an image that is not going to move, you might as well give it a bit of an extra flair, right? But hey, corners have to be cut, especially in a conveyor belt production like this. So it's not hard to live with these, it's just something that comes up occasionally. And a lot of the things I'm going to mention today are probably going to be smaller points, but the thing about small things is that they build up over time, so keep that in mind. But maybe the biggest single issue of the visuals are the backgrounds. Atelier Musa's background work for the anime remains consistently subpar, with many of the locations looking uninteresting, bland, and lifeless. Not to mention the use of blotch texturing, which makes everything look as if it has coffee stains on it, as well as the very shapeless nature art, which just does not look great in my opinion. If you don't know what I mean and are having a hard time to understand what I mean with the backgrounds, because I personally also didn't quite get what people meant when they talked about it, go watch Heroes Rising sometime and focus specifically on the backgrounds. Then watch the TV anime and do the same. The difference is night and day, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You're welcome. However, on the positive front, the animation often adds small extra flares that were not present in the manga. For example, additional character animation or expressive visualized sound effects, especially in the newest season, as well as referencing extra diegetic material such as color pages and volume covers. These touches are small, but again, they add up over time to give the anime its own charm and feel. I personally am a big fan of the way the anime differentiates characters through their animated mannerisms. From extreme examples like Ida's robot moves to Ashido's constant fidgeting, it makes these people feel alive and personable, and that is really cute. It is also impressive that it remains relatively consistent, even across episodes that are otherwise not as visually impressive. Also, when the animation chooses to pop off, it pops the fuck off. While the show doesn't move a lot during some of the more incidental moments, the big showstoppers are given exciting and viscerally affecting visuals by some of the real star talent, including Yutaka Nakamura, Koki Fujimoto, and series character designer and director at some point, Yoshihiko Makoshi. Season 4, which arguably was one of the more troubled seasons, even ended with the anime's strongest episode, a 20-minute extravaganza of all manner of talent coming together to animate the fuck out of Endeavor frying a mutant to death. While I'm not going to review the story of MHA, since I do that in every other video already, I do want to talk about how that story is communicated in animated format. The addition of voice acting, music, and color mean that now the director has to think about new elements when crafting and adapting a scene. This leads us to the topic of direction, the art of designing scenes and stories in a visually coherent and interesting way. And this is where the anime loses me a little bit. Throughout much of the first 3 seasons, the anime attempts to match the boarding and framing of the manga panels as closely as possible, identifying itself as a very faithful adaptation. However, this is not really as good of a thing as it might sound. The manga is drawn to be enjoyed and experienced in the manga format, and that doesn't always translate well onto the screen. Think about how, for example, manga is a vertical medium, while modern TV is horizontal. The compositions that worked in one may not work in the other. So many key scenes run the risk of just being colored, less detailed, and less well-composed versions of their manga counterparts, which is not just a shame in its own right, but also limits directional creativity. I think the best way to illustrate what I mean is to look at an example of good direction. When Deku goes to meet Night Eye, the anime includes this shot, completely original, which shows how imposing and anal Night Eye is while being genuinely fun and interesting to look at to try and figure out how the various reflections work. And while these moments do pop up, they are the exception. Most of the time, the anime is oriented by the manga panels, and so creative shots like these don't appear all that often. Most of the time, most shots are just an inferior version of the manga counterparts, and that just is not very enjoyable, especially if you have read the manga. However, good direction does exist, and as it shows up, it gives us glimpses of something truly special, My Hero Academia taken to creative heights, which insanely cool compositions and ideas abound. The way Night Eye's quirk is depicted, for example, is generally pretty cool, as well as many of the all-for-one lore scenes using some cool post-processing effects like scratches and fractals to really give it that ancient feel. It's good stuff. When it pops up, I just wish it would pop up a bit more often. Another aspect that goes into direction is creating atmosphere and mood. And I'm not gonna beat around the bush too much, the anime is mostly alright with this. It leans very heavily into the wholesome and inspirational vibe of the story, which can be really great at times. Pretty much every scene between the kids is given a lighthearted and casual mood that elevates them beyond the manga, which really helps in making you care for these little idiots. And every moment of triumph is given space, fanfare, and excitement that really gets the blood flowing. However, one area where this bites the anime in the ass is any story segment that is more depressing or dark. Victories, after all, only feel good if there was darkness that had to be overcome, and the anime seems to willingly mellow out that darkness in order to appeal to a younger demographic, potentially and probably because of its time slot. Characters like All for One and Overall have some of the more disturbing features neutered and decreased, and while censorship isn't everywhere, it pops up, understandably. But maybe the biggest issue here for me is how the anime, outside of a few exceptions, refuses to use any color palettes except midday brightness. Locations like Overhaul's lair, which could have been the opportunity for some truly dramatic lighting in one of the darkest arcs of the series, are lit like a noon stroll in the park, and as a result loses most of its atmosphere. And all-day scenes are lit pretty much the same too, making most of the events look way less affecting than they should. Everything looks like it happens under the midday sun, and that is just not very exciting. And aside from the Endeavor episode, that is pretty much the norm, and that's a shame. Another shame is the pace. While it for the most part is alright, the anime sometimes hits weird spots of incredibly inconsistent pacing, for example during the joint training arc, when the series slows down to a crawl through the overuse of flashbacks. These tiny callbacks exist in the manga as a single picture, but are here translated into full re-showings of entire scenes, which really kills the momentum of some scenes. And it is not limited to the joint training arc. Some flashbacks are even expanded, which is good to give the viewer additional context, but bad because, again, the momentum of any given episode is just absolutely murdered. Intersecting with direction is storytelling, the communication and ordering of story segments. There isn't much to say here because generally the anime doesn't alter the story of the manga at all, so the story of the anime is the story of the manga. There are only two notable exceptions to this. At the end of Season 2, the summer exams, which were all simultaneous in the manga, are instead made to happen in a set order. This change is a godsend, and maybe one of the best things the anime has ever done, because it turns a confusing, incoherent mess that switches between 10 locations constantly into a streamlined, easily digestible sequence of battles. This change ends up being unambiguously to the series' benefit. The second example is still up in the air. As of writing this video, it's become evident that Season 5 will be switching the order of the Endeavor Agency and My Villain Academia arcs, by far the biggest change the anime has ever made to the story. There are loads of scenes that depend on the order, so it's easy to be anxious, but I can't see the future, so I'll let the future you versions tell me how it went. I am, however, hopeful. Bones seems to be very passionate about this project, and I think they probably put some thought into it. I routinely got bottom grades in music class, but even I can tell you that Yuki Hayashi's score for My Hero Academia fucks. It slow fucks me against the wall and offers me champagne afterwards, in fact. The compositions are emotionally charged and carry every energy you would want, from slow sadness to furious anger to triumphant joy. Also, Gentle's theme is literally from TF2, so that's cool. Saying his music is a great fit for the series would be insanely redundant. There's a reason You Say Run became one of the most recognizable anime tracks ever, and singing its praises, while fun, doesn't really tell anything new. The music is phenomenal by itself. So instead of saying any of that, allow me to bitch, since I clearly haven't done that enough already. While Hayashi's music is amazing, its actual placement is incredibly hit or miss past Season 3. The man composes godlike tracks, but way too many either go unused or are used in nonsensical places. Overhaul's theme, which is a Yakuza trap beat, only plays in the filler episode once. The track, literally called Deku and Kachan, which combines You Say Run with Bakugo's theme and was composed for a season where the two fight, does not play during their fight beyond tiny snippets and is instead saved for Mirio walking through a door once. And this fate befalls many fantastic tracks. Aoyama's theme, which is a banger, remains unused to this day. And I think the reason for this is another shortcoming. While Hayashi has over 5 seasons composed dozens of tracks, the anime, for some reason, insists on only using the same 5 osts over and over for 90% of all non-climax scenes, and it really makes it seem like the anime has no clear vision or idea how to handle the smaller moments on an auditory level. The series has lately begun using specially composed insert songs for key scenes though, which is very appreciated. I love Might You and I love Hero 2. They're both fantastic songs and I cannot wait to get my hands on the insert song that they use for the Christmas episode as well. Speaking of appreciating the sound design, boy, that voice acting. In all language versions that I can judge, the voice cast does a great job, with only some incidental voices falling short occasionally. The Japanese offering presents a strong range of tones that are, as far as my non-Japanese ass can tell, masterfully controlled and directed. The English dub, which I can judge more easily because I speak the English, also shines, with many voice actors either perfectly replicating the Japanese version or giving it their own flair, both of which are valid approaches. Some characters, like Shigaraki, tragically end up with weaker performances in both versions, but even here, improvements are regularly heard. I was never hot on either version of Shigaraki, but the first glimpses of My Villain Academia that we've gotten have both the Japanese counterpart and the English counterpart presenting a pretty strong performance. As for sound effects, literally no complaints here. Everything sounds as it should, and I am especially fond of the juicy sound of One For All activating. Really makes you understand why so many characters shit themselves when it's coming for them. If I had to sum up My Hero Academia's anime adaptation, it would be good. It is neither an extravagant flawless translation, nor a train wreck disaster. It is, for better or worse, a perfectly serviceable way to experience a story that peaks in tandem with said story. However, its lack of creative vision harms the moment-to-moment experience at times, which does hold it back a bit. However, for a series going on 5 seasons long, its quality remains as strong as its grip over the anime community, with its highlights easily making up for any shortcomings. Like, sometimes I feel compelled to just complain about small things that annoy me because I'm an obsessive weirdo, but if the worst thing I can say about an anime adaptation is that it sometimes shits the bed in the smaller, inconsistent, and unimportant scenes, then honestly, I'm fine. I was excited for Berserk 2016, and I'm happy that nothing like that has ever happened to another series that I care. So, I'm good. While I might complain over on Twitter, I might complain over on other videos sometimes that certain things bother me, especially some of the directorial choices, at the end of the day, I'm having fun, and I have never been in a situation where I felt that recommending someone the anime was a worse choice than recommending them the manga. If anything, I would say that for 90% of its run, the anime can stand on its own and is a perfectly acceptable way of experiencing the story for the first time. And the other 10%, just read the manga after you caught up. It's very easy to read, apps exist, you do you, I love you. Hey all, thank you for watching, I really appreciate all the support you give me as usual, and of course a special thank you to all my patrons, including Archagent Everlasting, Daniel Garcia, Fictionape, Ignis, Paracha, Sini, Victor Perez, Cesar Londono, Trader, and Mr. Meander. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you around. Bye bye.